me that you're going to be looking at least for the next few meetings. Just a few reminders. This is a public meeting, and so it is being recorded. If you would like the video afterwards, you can just reach out to us. Also, this will be sent out on an interested party list, so it will be made available in case you need more information or in case you feel like you need something. Before we get into today's agenda, I just want to very quickly do roll call, just go through it so that we can see who is here from the advisory board. So I believe Aaron is here, but I know they were having issues with hearing and all of hearing us or like having access to it. So Aaron, I see you. If you could maybe just, I don't know if you can unmute or if you're still having problems. But I do see that you're here. If you are having issues with your audio, you can just utilize the chat if you'd like. Perfect. Okay. Yeah, if you want to try and join via phone, that's also an option. So, okay. Oh, there's Jeff. I was actually just gonna call. Hi, Jeff. I was just getting ready to call your name, so we will mark you present. Perfect timing. Is Jen Fraga here?
Yes, I'm here.
Perfect. Jess Marks? I don't think we'll be here today. Dr. Carlson?
Hey there, I'm here.
Perfect. Kimberly will not be here. Laura has already indicated that she is here. Sheriff Morrissey O'Donnell?
I am here, thank you.
Thank you. Lori Palmer? Okay. Peter Klim? Peter here? Rep Boyce?
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. Rep Reynolds?
Hi, I'm here. I'm here. It took me a minute to unmute. Thank you.
That's
Hi.
okay. Welcome. Roy Moore? Senator Salmon?
Here.
Welcome. Shannon Civil? I think I said that last name right.
Hi, Savell, yes.
Savell, okay. I apologize. And then Vince Jones Dixon. Okay. Perfect. All right. So here is today's a bit summary of what we're going to cover today. We do, as requested from our last meeting, we do have two presentations that we're going to go through for the first 30 minutes or so on protective orders and gun ownership and safe storage. So we're going to get through those. Last time y'all requested a preview or I guess a review of previous presentations. On Monday, y'all should have received those PowerPoints. I do have a list of presentations that we've gone through, and I believe the first one was in September of last year, so it has been some time. We will just have like a quick discussion on those past presentations to see if there's anything else that you all need to know. And then we are going to get into the next steps in April meeting in particular and what needs to occur for this advisory board to start making some actual decisions. And so beyond this meeting, if just from indicated from last meeting, we will be moving from the informational stage into kind of the decision-making stage for y'all. So we'll get into some detail as to what that looks like in terms of priorities. I believe some of you, if not all of you, have seen those slides. We really review those priorities, as well as some of the funding, the required funding allocations, just to be thinking about when we do begin making those decisions in April. As discussed last time, we did talk about there will be a need, at least for the short term, from now and probably through the summer to begin meeting monthly. And so the plan is to meet in April and May. We do have to send some things back to BJA for approval before we can then prioritize and get these funds out. And so it is going to take some time. And we'll kind of discuss that in more detail. But the one thing that I do want to stress is that from April on, if there's any decision making, we will need quorum in this group. Or we're not able to make any decisions. And so quorum for this particular group is 10 members. 10 voting members need to be present. And so, like I said, today we're just doing some informational presentations, and then we will be moving into a larger discussion kind of on next steps and what you all need from us in terms of information to be able to begin to prioritize the first round of funding. But we will, going forward, need quorum for any decisions to be made with this group. So, so far we've been doing these meetings at the end of the month, usually on a Wednesday and Thursday. It's usually what kind of, what ends up working for the most amount of people with the doodle polls that are sent out. If there is another time, or if there's something that we are not providing, an option for those kinds of meetings, we are still trying to hold them to an hour and a half. Please let us know, and we can adjust when we do send out that doodle poll to try to schedule these. So that's kind of what we're doing today. And like I said, we will be talking a little bit more in detail in terms of what that April meeting is actually going to look like, and what you all, what kinds of decisions you all need to be making at that point. So, and then we will end the meeting with an opportunity for public comment. So any questions on where we're going today and what the point of today is? Okay, perfect. Then I am going to stop sharing. Our first presentation is from Paul Kemp. He has agreed to be here. He's going to do a very quick presentation. Paul, as soon as I quit sharing, if you'd like to, you can share your presentation, and then we are going to hear, after Paul, we're going to hear from Alexa Pinkard for one of the requests was protective orders, and so she's here to just quickly go over protective orders and how they differ a little bit from ERPOs. So I will stop sharing. And Paul, it is all you. If you would like to share, you can. If not, go ahead and present however you'd like to.
One question is, I have not presented PowerPoint in Teams before. I know there's an option on my PowerPoint. Is that the best way to do that?
If you go up on your
Slideshow
team screen where it says share.
Oh, right.
And then you can share your screen, or you can scroll all the way down to the bottom. And where it says upload from your computer, you can hit that. If your presentation is on like your desktop, saved on your desktop, you can upload it through that.
All right.
Or if you want to, you can. I should have had you, if you want to, oh, there we go.
Let's just try it this way and see.
That works. It's just still in,
Yeah.
It's not quite in presentation mode.
There we go.
There we go. Perfect.
Okay. Hi. So my name is Paul Kemp. I'm a founding board member for Gun Owners for Responsible Ownership. And this is just basically to go over some safe storage options and so on for folks. Oops. So who we are gun owners, outdoor enthusiasts, veterans, mothers, fathers, daughters, and sons who seek reasonable and responsible solutions to preventing gun violence. We're also a voice for gun owners in the middle of extremist views on the left and the right. Why we do this work. Our commitment to reducing gun violence arose from the December 11, 2012 shooting at the Clackamas Town Center Mall. A shooter had easy access to loaded and unlocked firearms that resulted in 2 deaths, 1 injury, and thousands of people running for their lives. All victims were strangers to the shooter, but to us, they were neighbors, family, and friends. I also want to note that the shooter also took his own life with one of those loaded and unsecured firearms at the mall. We believe gun owners must help lead on the reduction of gun violence. Our Second Amendment rights come with responsibilities. We support common sense regulations to reduce gun violence or promote gun safety. Owning a gun should include a personal commitment to safe and responsible use of firearms. And a firearm can be a useful tool for hunting, target shooting, and very rarely for personal protection. It is also a deadly weapon. It's not a toy or a political statement. Why do Americans own guns? The reasons have changed over time. Back in 1999, according to the polling, almost 50% of the people that own firearms said they owned them for hunting. 26% of those indicated they own firearms for self-protection. Since that time, a recent study in Pew had indicated that nowadays 32% of the people that own firearms own them for hunting, while 72% say they own firearms for self-protection. So firearm safety questions for families and seniors. Where and how do I securely store firearms and ammunition in my home? How do I securely store firearms in my vehicle? Are children typically in my home? Does anyone in my home have a serious mental health issue, or is anyone in a serious temporary crisis? Another thing is ask before your children play at someone else's home. Do you have guns? Do they have guns in the house? If so, are they loaded? And are they locked up and stored and out of reach of kids? Safe gun storage can save lives at home, at school, and in the community. An estimated number, 26,000 children in Oregon live in a home with an unlocked firearm. 76% of the school shooters obtained their gun from their home or the home of a family member or home of a close friend. Nationally, 89% of the unintentional shooting deaths of children occur in the home, most of which occur when children are playing with a loaded gun in their parents' absence. There's a national trend where about half of the states have more gun deaths due to gun violence than motor vehicle accidents. Oregon is now one of those states where gun deaths due to gun violence exceed motor vehicle deaths. Secure storage can reduce suicide risk. In Oregon, roughly 75% of all firearm deaths are the result of suicide. Most people attempt suicide impulsively during acute periods of a temporary mental crisis or some other personal crisis. The vast majority of people who attempt suicide survive and go on to live out their lives without attempting suicide again. But easily accessible firearms dramatically increase the chance of fatality during a suicide attempt. A secure locking device can provide critical time for second thoughts. Also want to note that you can call or text 988 nationally for a suicide prevention hotline. Secure storage can help prevent firearm theft. A well-built metal lockbox or gun safe can deter theft in the home or vehicle. We also encourage people to write down the firearm caliber, model, and serial numbers and keep them in a separate place so that an accurate report can be made to law enforcement if lost or stolen. What is safe firearm storage? When not in use, all guns should be kept unloaded and locked. Ammunition should be locked and stored separately. Don't share these lock combinations. Store keys in a key safe or some other secure location. And keep guns secured during transport. Guns and cars should be securely stored as well. What are my options for safe storage? Most firearms sold in retail settings come with a locking device from the manufacturer. There's no additional cost for this safety device. A simple cable lock or trigger lock costs less than $15 and prevents the weapon from being fired. A wide variety of gun safes and lock boxes are readily available at retail stores. If buying a safe, we recommend choosing one that is certified by the California Department of Justice. There's a website for reference. Here's some commonly used firearm locking devices, examples. In photo number 1 is a combination trigger lock, and the user purchaser of that trigger lock can set that combination to whatever they want. They can also change it in the future if they need to. In photo 2 is a custom locking device, trigger locking device that came with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun that I purchased. To open this lock, I added a padlock, which requires a key. And then there's also a special tool that came from the manufacturer to open that lock as well. In photo 3, you can see a GoPro branded cable lock that is on a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. The great thing about these cable locks is you have to remove the cartridge and you have to pull the slide back, and there cannot be a round in the chamber. So visually, you can see that this firearm is completely unloaded and there's no round in the chamber. With photos 1, 2, and 4 using a trigger lock, the cartridge can still be in the handgun, and also there could be a round in the chamber. And this is somewhat true with the long guns. You could have a round in the chamber. So even though you're always supposed to treat a firearm as though it's loaded, the cable lock in this case makes a good visual inspection that you clearly know there is no round in the chamber. And people that are not as familiar with handling firearms may take a trigger lock off and not think to check that if there's a round in the chamber, and also that the cartridge is in the handgun, especially true with children and people, like I said, who are inexperienced. And then in photo 4 is a GoPro branded keyed trigger lock, similar to other options, and these are very secure devices. In photo 5 is a cable lock on a revolver, and that one is another way you can clearly see that the firearm is unloaded and it can't be fired. And this works with single action, double action, and split raised revolvers. Commonly used handgun lock boxes. There's a myth that safe storage means I can't access my gun in an emergency. The reality is these safes and lock boxes using a key, a simple 4-digit code, or a biometric swipe of a finger are designed to be open in seconds. However, you do need to practice accessing the firearms. These safes are readily available in retail stores, many costing less than $100. You can and should lock up your gun no matter what. Here's some examples of commonly used handgun lock boxes. In the photo 1 is just a simple keyed lockbox. This one also has a carry handle on it and is good for taking a firearm, if you're traveling with one, moving it in and out of the car, and you can certainly take this into a hotel room. And then in photo 2 in the center is a example of a sturdier electronic handgun lockbox, and the user sets the code. With this, it also has some holes in the bottom of the box where it can be bolted down to a shelf or in a automobile or somewhere if you want to keep it secure. And this has a key as a backup if the battery were to die. Also, the battery powers a audible signal. When the lid is lifted on this lockbox, you can turn that audible signal on or off. And there's also a small or low intensity blue or red light that shines when you open the top so you can see the contents of the lockbox. And then on the far right is a biometric lockbox. And this again has a key backup, also has a light inside, audible signal. And with this biometric lockbox, this one in particular will store up to 15 different fingerprints. They recommend doing a print, off of, more than one finger on each hand. And then you can also have other adults in the home who may need access or want access to this firearm. And so, like I said, with 15 fingerprint stores, you can include multiple people. And here's some examples of commonly used gun locking devices for vehicles for long guns. On the left, in photo 1, is a portable long gun lockbox for a car. These are not that expensive. They're also a good way to move firearms in and out of your home into your vehicle, and they protect the firearm if you're traveling. I don't know if this one is TSA approved, but you can buy TSA approved lock boxes for traveling. And the second item is a fixed long gun box for vehicles where these can be bolted into a vehicle and secured. These are a lot more expensive, but if you do a lot of hunting and you're traveling in a larger truck with 4 doors, you have multiple hunters, this might be one good way to do that. So again, these are some examples. And also here in Oregon, handguns are not to be left unattended and within view of persons outside of the vehicle per current Oregon law. You can see the previous slides for secure handgun storage options. What else do I need to know? No lock is completely foolproof. Give special thought if children are in the home. A cable lock may be enough to protect a toddler, but a combination safe is a better choice in a home with teens. If anyone in the home is suicidal, locks are not enough. Remove all firearms from the home. When children are visiting friends or family, ask, are there firearms in the home? Are they loaded? And are they locked up and safely stored? Also wanted to mention family safety extreme risk protection orders. An ERPO is a court order that temporarily prevents a person who is at risk of hurting another person or committing suicide from having or obtaining a firearm. There's no cost to file an ERPO in Oregon. A person subject to an ERPO must surrender their firearms to law enforcement within 24 hours. Any family member, household member, or intimate partner may apply for an ERPO. Law enforcement officers may also apply. An ERPO petition should be filed in the circuit court of the county where the respondent lives. This page has some resources for suicide prevention, how you transfer a firearm, and background checks in Oregon. There's also some planning resources here for the disposition of firearms that someone may include in a will, or if they become incapacitated and can no longer safely use their firearms. And then there's some more information about ERPOs in Oregon. And in Oregon, safe firearm storage, it's now the law. Senate Bill 554 was adopted by the legislature and came into effect September 25th in 2021. Firearm owners must secure it with a cable or trigger lock, a locked container, or in a gun room unless the firearm is being carried by them or under their own control. Failure to secure the firearm is a Class C to Class A violation if a minor gains access to the firearm. And if an unsecured firearm is used to injure persons or property, the owner is presumed negligent and subject to damages in a court action. Additional provisions of Oregon's safe storage law. Gun owners must report a theft of a firearm within 72 hours of knowing a theft or loss has occurred. Failure to report the theft is a Class B violation, and if a firearm is used to injure persons or property, the owner is presumed negligent in a court action for damages. A person who transfers a firearm to a minor must directly supervise the use of that firearm by the minor. Failure to directly supervise a minor constitutes presumed negligence in a court action for damages. That's the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Paul. Does anybody have any comments or questions for Paul? Rep Reynolds.
Hey there, great to see Paul. Nice
Good
to
to
see
you.
you. I'm curious, and I feel like this might be something I should know. I'm curious if we know if we've seen any impacts of safe storage yet. Like, have we seen a decrease in gun thefts? Have we seen a decrease in accidental child deaths? I mean, luckily, although, apparently 2023 nationwide was the highest number of kids who killed kids with unsecured guns. Do we know yet if we've had an impact in Oregon? Does anyone know that answer?
Well, I can say personally, I haven't looked for any of that data that the state of Oregon may have collected. And given that it's the beginning of, or not the beginning, but it's close to the start of 2024, I don't quite know how long it takes to collect that data and make it publicly available. But those are good questions. And that would be proof perhaps that the law is working. Although sometimes it's hard to, how do you count something that doesn't happen? That's always an issue.
That's a good point,
Sorry.
Paul. Sorry, this is Kathleen. I was just gonna point out that I think it's too soon, Representative Reynolds, to really know, but I also find myself really wanting to look at that. And statistically speaking, it will be hard to show the differences with our epidemiologic tools. But I do think about like survey methods, and interview type survey of firearm owners to learn about storage behaviors and whether those have changed over time. Also, our state Healthy Teen Survey, I believe, is adding back in our firearm module as of this year. So I don't know if Laura's on. Laura, you were on, I think. Laura Chisholm, she may be able to speak to that, but so we have a gap in knowing access, like understanding access among teens and other youth to firearms because of this gap in since 2004 and having this questionnaire or this module. But with it being reinstated over time, then we could track changes in children's responses about ready access to firearms. Dr. Chisholm, are you on? Is that correct? Sorry to put you on the spot.
I am on, Dr.
No.
Carlson, and yeah, I actually don't have an update, and I really appreciate you bringing this up because I am overdue to reach out to find out what the status of that is. But you're correct, we were looking at potentially reinstating that module because it's obviously really important information for us. So I will do some sleuthing and get back to this group about where we are with that.
Great. Yeah, no, I think and I think even gun owner knowledge about this law, and we've talked about even doing some education through the schools, so that parents know, and kind of were told that was too much for schools to take on right now, but maybe at some point. Yeah, great. Thank you so much.
Good question.
Dr. Reynolds, I think there are other states who've had CAP laws, child access prevention laws. And I know in other states, I've seen data that says those incidents have gone down when those laws have become effective. Unfortunately, Oregon's law, there is no criminal penalty. It's just civil penalties. But it at least is a step in the right direction compared to what Oregon had prior to the passage of this, the SB 554.
Senator Solomon, did you have a comment?
Yeah, thank you so much. I was just going to kind of piggyback to what Paul was saying, that I know that when we first initially were talking about safe storage in Oregon, we talked a lot about the statistics out of, I think it was Massachusetts. And so I tried to quickly look to see like what their reference, but I know that maybe perhaps we can learn from them in a way of how they collected their data and be able to utilize that the way they did it. So just for sharing that. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Paul? Paul, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Well, I mean, one thing I would add is the things that we're advocating for, or that I mentioned here, and in many of the CAP laws that you see around the country, parallel the gun safety laws that you will hear repeated by gun manufacturers. They're on the NRA's website. They, pay particular attention to prevent child access to firearms. So, nobody is saying anything that isn't recommended by the industry itself. It's just some of the other rhetoric you hear from the industry kind of poo-poos the safe storage part of it. And I think we should just heed that advice. And especially if you take a safe storage or gun safety class, they'll tell you the same things in the class. So, you know, we're saying what the industry says and what experts say.
Senator Solomon, yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you. And I just really wanted to say quickly to Paul Kemp, I mean, thank you again for being here and for your advocacy through personal pain in helping people, and you have been really right alongside us in all of this in this legislation, and such a strong advocate. And I just really wanted to just publicly say thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Solomon. Okay, if nobody else has any other questions or comments, we are gonna move on. So the last informational item that y'all asked for was the difference between protective orders in general and ERPOs. And so I've asked Alexa from the Center Against Rape and Domestic Violence to come and present to y'all about protective orders in particular and what those are. So Alexa, I'll let you introduce yourself with your presentation, but if you would like to share, if you have a presentation, then you can, and you can go ahead and start whenever you're ready.
I do, thank you. My name's Alexa Pinkard. I am the legal advocate at the Center Against Rape and Domestic Violence. We are a domestic violence shelter in Corvallis, Oregon, with a 24-hour hotline and confidential shelter for survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and sex trafficking. And I'm right along with Paul going to try to figure out how to share this presentation because I have not worked through this Teams before. Let's see, share. Rachel, what did you tell me to do as far as, did you say share?
You can share a screen if it's up on your screen. And then I can let you know if anybody has a question because I don't think you'll be able to see that. But if you want to share your screen, well, I'll let you know when you can see your presentation or when we can.
Oh, I see. If I just pull this down. All right.
There you go.
Sorry, everyone.
That's okay. There's like 5 or 6 different platforms and it's hard to keep up with all the places to do all the things. So, okay, we can see it. Okay. So go ahead whenever you're ready.
1 second. I guess I just minimize you guys. Okay, thanks for having me, everyone. Whoops. All right, so I'm just going to do kind of an overview of the different types of protective orders. I apologize if you're already familiar with some of this knowledge, but I'm going to start my timer here too so I can try to be respectful of your time because it's kind of detailed. So my role as a legal advocate is to accompany people to court. I assist with survivors or petitioners who are petitioning for different types of temporary protective orders, helping them fill out paperwork. And then I sit in on all of the protective order court hearings, kind of check in with people after, help answer their questions, talk about the process that follows and things like that. So general information about protective orders in the state, they are free to file. Petitioner may file in the county where they or the respondent lives. Court-appointed guardian or guardian ad litem may file on petitioner's behalf if the petitioner is a minor or someone who needs a court-appointed guardian. Petitions are public record as well as the hearings. They are open to the public. Initial hearing when they are first petitioning for an order is called ex parte or ex parte hearing, which just means they're the only party in the case present that day, typically. The Sheriff's Department will attempt to serve the order once they are granted. Anyone over the age of 18 who is not the petitioner may also serve the paperwork. However, in these situations, obviously sometimes the respondent is dangerous, so it's preferable that the Sheriff's Department would serve papers. Existing restraining orders may be modified or dropped by the petitioner if needed. The first protective order I'll go over is the Family Abuse Prevention Act. We call that the FAPA. There are some requirements. I can read those to you, but to summarize, this order is really focused and centered around physical abuse or potential physical abuse, as well as sexual abuse. The relationship requirements to petition for this type of order is that it be a current or former intimate partner, spouse, or domestic partnership, someone the petitioner has been in a sexually intimate relationship with within the past 2 years, or a family member, so related by blood marriage or adoption, or the parent of their child, so they have a shared minor child. The standard of abuse that the acts need to meet for this order are that the abuse occurred within the last 180 days, so 6 months. There is an exception to that. To most of these orders, there's an exception if the respondent lived more than 100 miles away or was spent any amount of time in jail or prison. What they're looking for to grant this order is that the petitioner was either physically injured, the respondent tried to physically injure the petitioner, they were in fear they were about to be physically injured, or they were forced to have sexual relations without their consent. They must also feel that they are in ongoing danger of further abuse or imminent danger, and that the respondent is a threat to the physical safety of themselves or members of their or children or members of their household. This order is good now as of January of this year. It will last for 2 years with the option at the end of that 2 years to renew. Things that this includes protections are that the respondent would maintain 150 feet distance at all times. They would be prohibited from different methods of contact, whether that be directly through a third party, electronics, social media, text message, phone, all of those things. They can request a move out order. So if the respondent and petitioner are cohabitating, the court can order that the respondent actually move out of that home. Typically that's done if both parties are on the lease or just the petitioner is on the lease of the home. If the respondent owns the home or is the only one on the lease, they can request a civil standby where a police officer will accompany the petitioner to that former residence to gather their essential belongings. They're also included in these orders, which is really important, is a temporary custody or parenting plan. So in a dangerous situation, between intimate partners, this order will include, they can request sole custody temporarily of a shared minor child, or they can write in a parenting plan, which could include like supervision or limited time with the respondent. Custody assistance from a peace officer to retrieve the child if the child is in the care of the respondent can be requested. Emergency monetary assistance if the petitioner was like displaced or belongings were destroyed, things like that, needing assistance for child associated things. They can request protection for their pets, and they can also request the firearms prohibition and dispossession, which typically is up to the judge on each of these orders, whether or not, well, everything's up to the judge, but so the judge's discretion whether they grant that firearms prohibition. In some cases they might, in some cases they might wait until a contested hearing. Each of the orders have a chance to be contested by the respondent, so they have 30 days from the day that they've been served to contest and request a hearing. These orders, this is going to be with the exception of a stalking order that's a little different, and I'll talk about that, but these orders are considered temporary until that contested hearing either occurs or that time period goes by that the respondent had to request it. And then upon the contested hearing, which I'll get to, the decision will be made if the order will be upheld or dismissed. For stalking protective orders, there's no age requirement, there's no relationship requirement, and the standard of abuse is 2 or more incidences in the past 2 years. So that expands that time frame a little bit. And the incidences are considered repeated and unwanted contact directly or through a third party to the petitioner or members of their family or household. The petitioner must have made it clear that the contact was unwanted in some way, and the contacts must cause alarm, fear, or the feeling of being forced to do or not do something. The contacts must also cause the petitioner to reasonably fear for their physical safety or that of their family or household members. So a little bit, quite a bit different standard of abuse for these orders. Let's see, when the stalking order, if a temporary stalking order is granted, the court will, at that initial hearing, schedule a show cause hearing, what's called a show cause hearing. They will call both parties in and they will ask the respondent if they want to have a contested hearing. Reason for this, I think, being that stalking orders are permanent if they're upheld. So they're trying to make face-to-face contact with the respondent to ensure they offer that person a fair hearing to speak on this before it goes into effect permanently. Whereas for the FAPA and the other couple, the respondent has to take initiative in that 30-day period and come in to request that hearing. The firearms prohibition also can be requested in a stalking order, but there does need to be the qualifying relationship, which is current or former intimate partner, family or household member, parent of child, related by blood, marriage, or adoption. And the protections that this order can give are visual. The respondent must remain out of visual or physical presence. They cannot follow, wait outside the home, property, place of work, etc. Cannot make written or electronic communications directly or through a third party. They cannot speak with intent to negatively affect the petitioner's relationships. They cannot communicate with business entities with intent of negatively affecting petitioners. So like their job, their place of employment, things like that. Cannot cause damage to home, property, and they cannot deliver objects directly or through a third party. That's kind of what the stalking order entails, quite a bit different than the family abuse prevention. The third order I'll talk about is the Elderly Persons and Persons with Disabilities Abuse Prevention Act. We call that the FDAPA. The age qualification, this order is designed for those who are 65 years or older, or a person with a disability. Could be both, but must be at least one or the other of those two things. There's no relationship requirement. However, the petitioner cannot file against a court-appointed guardian or conservator. In that scenario, if they feel they're being abused, they need to speak with an attorney or contact the court where that was granted. Standard of abuse for this particular order is a bit more broad, whereas the family abuse prevention is really focused around physical abuse and danger to physical safety. The stalking order is as well as our, methods of contact that are a danger to physical safety. This order covers more emotional, verbal, physical abuse, as well as neglect, abandoning duties of care if it was a caregiver or a family member, insulting, inappropriate names, profanity, things like that, harassment, coercion. It also covers wrongfully taking money or property, and sexual contact without consent, or if the petitioner is incapable of consenting. So a bit more broad on this order. The petitioner must again feel they're in immediate and present danger of further abuse, and they have the order's good for 1 year with an option to renew. And again, the respondent will have 30 days to contest this and request a hearing. The protections, it prohibits contact. They can also request the move out order where the court will order the respondent to move out of the home. They can request a civil standby, again, to retrieve their belongings or have the respondent be removed from the home. There can be a firearms prohibition ordered. That again is with the qualifying relationship. And then they can request to have their money or property that's been wrongfully taken returned to them. The Sexual Abuse Protective Order, we call that the SAPO. The relationship requirements, this one's focused on sexual abuse. The relationship requirements for adults, it cannot be a family or household member if it is someone who's 18 years or older petitioning. And the relationship needs to be, sorry, got lost there. It cannot be a husband, wife, registered domestic partner, an adult who they have had an intimate relationship with, cannot be related by blood marriage or adoption, or the parent of the child. And that, for that reason, is that the FAPA is the order that kind of covers those particular relationships for sexual abuse. For a minor under 18, the respondent must be 18 years or older, and minors under 12 need a guardian to file on their behalf. Standard of abuse is that respondent made petitioner have sexual contact without their consent, or when they were not capable of consenting. Again, petitioners in reasonable fear for their physical safety moving forward. This order prohibits contact, again, 150 feet away at all times, cannot contact directly or through a third party. It includes minor children and family or household members of the petitioner. It does have a firearms prohibition to the judge's discretion if they grant that or not. And this order remains in place for 5 years with an option to renew unless the petitioner is a minor, in which case it would be 5 years or until January 1st after they turn 18. And then the court may also turn this order into a permanent order if there's some different circumstances in which they might choose to make this order permanent. It may be renewed, modified, or dropped by the petitioner. Some other information generally about protective orders. The orders are not in effect technically until the respondent is served with that paperwork. The orders are considered temporary until a contested hearing judgment or until that period to contest has passed. The respondent has 30 days to contest and request a hearing. If shared minor children are involved, however, and they request a hearing, the court does their due diligence to schedule that hearing within 5 business days. Reason being that usually temporary custody and parenting is involved, so they want to make sure that they're figuring out the best plan for their children as soon as possible. The exception to the 30 days is that show cause we talked about for a stalking order. They automatically schedule that hearing, bring the parties in, and ask if the respondent would like a hearing. If a contested hearing occurs, the burden of proof is on the petitioner to tell the judge and the court why they feel the order should be upheld. They can give testimony, bring in witnesses, provide evidence, etc. Of course, the respondent will do the same. Order will be granted or denied, and if granted, it will remain in place for those timelines that we talked about earlier. Real quick, I don't have a slide for this, but to kind of talk about the differences between extreme risk protective orders. So the ERPOs seem to have a focus on firearms, the relationship or deadly weapons. The relationship requirements are, spouse, intimate partner, family member, same household, or law enforcement who can petition for those orders. So that does leave some gaps there, it seems, for people, in a stalking scenario where or an elderly or those who have a disability who maybe these relationships don't apply, but they are needing protection. And the main differences that I see between these two orders is that the ERPO does not include all of the individual protections and details or provisions of the other protective orders. So things like that move out order, the civil standby, the temporary custody and parenting time, the return of money or property, protecting pets, all of those things that we talked about earlier are not included in that order. So it does leave gaps in protections I think in my line of work in particular, we see, like I've seen somebody go in and apply for that particular order, the extreme risk, and while it was granted and that takes away, firearms or rights for weapons, those sorts of things, that escalates the person who the order has been, the respondent. It escalates the situation, and then the person who petitioned for that order may not have all of those other protections in place. So those are kind of some of the differences that I see there. There we go, stop sharing. I don't know if that worked to stop sharing, sorry. But just to kind of sum that up, that is the differences that I see.
Thank you, Alexa. Does anybody have any questions or comments on any of this? Dr. Carlson.
Sorry, Rachel. Can we pause for just a moment, because
Yep.
I actually lost I lost you guys. I can't find the meeting now. I'm so sorry.
We can see you, so you're still in the meeting.
Well, that's great. Okay, I am back. Sorry
Okay,
about that.
perfect. No,
Trying
you're
to
good.
keep up. I got Zoom, I got the Google Meets. This is new to
It's
me.
okay.
So
That's okay. Dr. Carlson, I
okay,
think you had a
questions or
comment.
comments?
Yeah.
I was actually just trying to applause and I hit the wrong button.
Oh,
but thank you,
perfect.
Alexa. Really nice presentation.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions or comments on any of the different types of protective orders? How they differ from ERPO? Senator Solomon.
Thank you so much. I first and foremost just want to thank you for all the information. And I just wanted to double check. We're going to receive those slides, correct? Because I was trying to follow along with the, so perfect. Thank
Sure.
you.
Yes.
Brilliant.
Yep,
We'll make
I'll
sure
send
they
those
go out.
over to you, Rachel.
Perfect. Anybody else? Any comments, questions? Paul. I think you're muted, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Alexa, that was a good point about the ERPOs escalating the situation. And I don't know if there's a way to link the ERPO and allow someone to get them the knowledge or understand these other protective orders that would, once this person is disarmed, would prevent this other escalation and or make consequences for that. That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that, but I've heard about the escalation aspect. I didn't know all these options for protective orders existed. I know I was talking with the sheriff of Clackamas County the other day, and they said that they provide help with people applying for like an ERPO and so on. I don't know if for domestic violence, if they provide similar help with these various protective orders or not, or if that's a standard feature for sheriffs around the state. I don't know. I don't know if you can answer that question either.
Well, I suppose it depends on what you mean by providing help, and it could also vary from county to county. But I think, like, yeah, I'm not sure what you quite mean by providing help with them. Do you mean in applying for them? Because it seems like, at least in my area down here, the sheriffs are a bit disconnected from the actual process of petitioning for these protective orders that I spoke about. They do, of course, get involved in the process of service, in the process of, moving people out, standing by, things like that, enforcing the orders, but they don't really have a hand in the process of petitioning for the orders. And so I kind of, support people and answer questions, help with paperwork, things like that. But the sheriffs kind of step in after the orders have been granted to just facilitate the process moving forward.
Well, and I guess what the sheriff was saying is they help people so they understand how the forms work and how they need to be filed and so on. And I don't know if there's, you know, throughout different counties and sheriff departments and other law enforcement departments, if they have people who have the knowledge of all these various protective orders, so they can advise someone if they get called to a place for domestic violence incident, and let them know about these options and what they might need to consider. And again, I don't know if you can answer this.
Well, that question gets a little tricky. So I would say I'm sure that it varies from between locations. What I often see occurring is police advising people to go and get protective orders, and people go to the court and petition for a protective order, and the judge says, well, that police officer did not know the qualifications for a restraining order, and they don't know the law well enough, and this does not qualify. And you see people leaving upset because they were advised to do it. So I think really it's an education thing. I think it would help to have more consistency throughout, throughout the systems, basically, and better education surrounding these topics. Of course, there are times when people go in and petition, and maybe they need protection and it's not granted. Sometimes there are abusive people who are the actual abusers going in and petitioning and getting protective orders granted. So these things are complicated and hard to, I think, maintain consistency. What I will say is I'm not as familiar, to be honest, with the extreme risk protective orders. I don't see them often. And what I don't know, maybe you all do, is how enforced that firearms prohibition is, because what I see happening with protective orders and the firearms prohibition that's included in them is it's basically voluntary. I mean, it should be involuntary, right? But what I see happen is it is up to the perpetrator to surrender their firearms. Unfortunately, a perpetrator could go in the backyard, to be quite frank, and bury them and dig them up tomorrow and say that I don't see law enforcement going into homes and ensuring that firearms have been surrendered. They, at least in my area, I don't know if that varies place to place, but it's really not a guarantee. And so really, it's sad to say, but we have to kind of tell people this is a piece of paper and it's requesting this person do this. And if the person doesn't care to do it, they're not going to. And so that's a really hard element of all of this. And they also have the option to surrender it to a family member or to law enforcement. Well, someone really likes their guns. Where are they going to take them? Probably not to law enforcement. And if they have an illegal weapon, there's no way of even tracking, right, that they got rid of their weapons. So, I mean, as you all know, it's just, it's hard. It's hard to make sure there's consistency throughout these systems. And I think it's great that you're all here talking about it, because it's incredibly important.
Thank
So
you,
if
Alexa.
I guess to close, if the ERPO provides that the law enforcement goes in and is, because I saw something on there about within 24 hours with the firearms prohibition and protective orders, I think they have like a window of weeks time period to surrender. So if the ERPO provides that law enforcement will enforce it better, I'm all about that. And it would be nice if it was consistent again through the different protective orders. So I'm not quite sure what that looks like, or if that varies by location, whether or not they kind of follow up on that prohibition. Of course, being unable to purchase them, that's important, but also if they already have them, I think making sure that these things are enforced and that law enforcement is maybe doing a little bit better job, no disrespect intended, of going in and following up. Not a better job, but systems in place that would better allow for these things to have follow through, I guess is what I would say. So
Thank you, Alexa. Senator Solomon?
Thank you so much, Rachel. Thank you, Alexa. I would say, so I've heard doing some ride-alongs locally, I've heard some stories of success that that our law enforcement have told me about, stories about ERPO. But I also heard from law enforcement saying it's not perfect. There are definite things that we really should look at. And I appreciate this group looking at that and making sure, because again, I just want to reemphasize what Paul had said, is that this group and others are about making sure that we are having responsible gun owners, and then in situations where you have described, what we can do to make sure that people who shouldn't have these guns and firearms, they don't get their hands on them. I'm a survivor of domestic violence. I'm very thankful that my dad had an aversion to guns. We did not have guns in our home, and we all know the statistics when that gun is present. And so I've been working with, I'm on the Family Justice Center advisory board, and we're working at the state level on a work group around the different processes that you've talked about domestic violence and the different protection orders. And I guess my question to you is, because I really am going to look forward to getting that information, is my question to you is one of the things I'm concerned about is lack of language access. Like, what are we doing to make sure that we are supporting all Oregonians that are needing some help with a language barrier? And how many languages are these documents available in, and what kind of right, see? And so these are things that we're definitely going to be talking about in our work group, because we've all seen the news stories where we've heard this has been a tragic ending. And so, I hope that you could reach out and give me your contact information, because you may be interested in somehow taking part in this conversation. But we're all trying to get this from all different angles, and I just really sincerely appreciate this conversation and this information.
That's an absolutely great thing to be talking about in your group. That's amazing, because it is a huge barrier. We do have Spanish speaking advocates, but what happens when a Spanish speaking individual, and that's just Spanish, not to mention every other language, but when somebody wants to fill out an order, they provide them in Spanish, they then have to be translated into English. So we're either translating one way or the other, or we're on the phone with the language line. It really there's not a great system or process for those who speak other languages to readily get these protections. That's a great thing to talk about, because that's really tough. And we do the best we can, using a telephonic language line, but even in Spanish, they can't answer, like we're translating onto one piece of paper, then onto the next. And so that's absolutely important thing to be discussing. Thank you for bringing that up. And I will send my presentation and information and everything as well to Rachel to pass that along to you guys.
Absolutely. Sheriff Mauricio O'Donnell.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to follow up on the gun dispossession efforts, just for awareness. The Multnomah County Sheriff's Office right now has a sergeant and 2 deputies. That is what they're funded to provide that service. So they serve the protection order. They work through the court orders where someone is required to relinquish and surrender their firearms. Because there is this dedicated resource, they're able to do a little bit more follow-up than if someone is just serving the protection order. And just a bit of data, we started this in 2020, and we were only able to have someone relinquish around 40 firearms in that 2020 year. But when we've added additional resources in 2022, it was 357 were surrendered, and 2023, 554. So we're seeing really good results. The concern for me is that we're unsure that funding will continue, because it was not funded with ongoing funding last year. So I'm waiting patiently to determine if we'll be able to continue that program, because given all the barriers that we've already talked about other ways that people can have family members or potentially say they don't have any firearms, I think there's a lot of barriers there. But to have a dedicated resource for that, I think really has been a safety benefit to our community. Also, given that, as we've talked about, you don't really know the data impacts because we're hoping we're saving lives.
Thank you, Sheriff. Any other comments
you.
or questions for Alexa or Paul before we move on? Yep, Senator Solomon.
Oh my gosh, I am so
Okay.
sorry. I'm such a
It's
chatty
okay.
Cathy here today.
It's okay.
It would be really great if we were able to receive some of that information from different law enforcement agencies on those statistics. If do we have the ability to do that? That would be fantastic, if so.
I can look into that for sure. Are you talking about just like the gun dispossess, like as in response to an ERPO or a protective order, or in general, any circumstance?
And
Or
it's
something.
Sheriff Marcy, right? Yeah. So what you had shared.
Yeah,
I mean, that's,
okay.
Yeah,
that's
any
great
circumstance.
information for us to be able to have.
Okay.
And I
Absolutely.
imagine that there are other agencies and law enforcement agencies that have that data. That'd be a good piece for us to have,
Perfect.
I
Okay.
think.
Yeah, that was
Perfect.
great data.
All right, Paul and Alexa, thank you so much for this. You both can stick around for the rest of this meeting. You don't have to. We're going to kind of get into some detail with this grant money, but appreciate both of you being here today, answering questions and presenting. When you get a chance, if you both could send me your PowerPoint presentation, that would be fantastic. And thank you both so much for being here. Appreciate it.
I've got to pop off, but thank you all so much. Appreciate it.
Sorry, my share by Alexa, my share button is weird. And so if I get the wrong presentation up here, please let me know, because I think I just did twice. Okay. Is this the right one? Can you see today's meeting instead of another PowerPoint presentation? Can you all see where we're at? Yes. Okay. So this is kind of where we're at with today's two presentations. You all received the PowerPoint presentations of previous presentations, previous informational sessions. And this is just kind of a list of the things that this group has talked about or received information on. We had a little bit of this conversation last time, and we've got about 20 minutes left to have this discussion. And so I just want to ask one more time, if there's, and I can go through these priority areas. So these are kind of the main funding priority for this grant program. Do you all feel like you have enough information? Are we missing stuff? Is there any other information that we can gather for y'all? And so when we kind of get to April, we can start having discussions on how to start prioritizing these funds. And so this is kind of the first part of what is prioritized. And then this slide, and we can make these available if you need a little bit of time to look at them, but this slide is also things to consider, possibilities, examples where funding can also go. And so if y'all remember our discussion last time, we currently, for the 22-23 allocation of funds, we have to prioritize $3.1 million, and we've got to have that that timeline for that is at the end of the federal fiscal year, and so it's September 30th. And this is why we have to start having these discussions in April and kind of make a decision. And so we will then have an allocation of 1.5 million for 24, 25, and 26. And so we will continue to receive funds for this grant program up into 2026. And so I'm saying this all because we can prioritize something for this first allocation or a few things, and then continue to have these conversations to decide what phase 2 might be in terms of getting funds out the door or something else to prioritize. And so it's not we don't have to go all in. We don't have to make one decision to fund one thing. We just need to do it for the allocation of 22-23. And so I'm just going to go back of these priorities, do you all feel like you have enough information from the presentations that have been provided to go forward in April to start having these discussions about prioritizing this first round of allocated funding? Any thoughts? Jeff.
Well, the answer to your question from where I sit is, yeah, we've heard a lot about them. And I think that with the super smart people that are in this group, we can prioritize. My problem's not going to be prioritizing this. Like all 4 of these things that are on the screen right now seem to me to be a high priority, and I'd like to be able to fund them all. With $3.1 million, maybe that's a way, and then it's a matter of allocating how much to each. But the basic question is, yeah, I think we do. Okay,
great. Thank you. Any other comments on these 2 slides? And any other information needed or anything? Is everybody kind of in agreement that we can continue this discussion and move out of the informational into kind of the prioritization of funds? Okay. With that, just a couple of things to keep in mind. I just this, we don't have to have a large discussion over this. I just kind of want to introduce this so that we are thinking about it next month. So there are a few requirements with these funds that they have to be allocated, and so one of them is a local pass-through requirement. And so it's kind of like it's broken down 40-60. And so states must pass through 40% of the portion to local governments. And they do define a unit of local government as a city, county, township, town, or tribes is also in there as well. And so you all have discretion on how those funds are passed through to local units. But this is not something that we are able to waive. So this is mandatory, that at least this amount of funds. And so the reason why this is something to consider is because some of the presentations that you've received have been state level programs, right? And so those are able to be funded as well. But there at least has to be a 40% pass through to local units of government. Okay, and so this is something to just keep in mind as we have these conversations next month in terms of prioritization and where these funds are going to go. The other thing to consider is hold on. Oh, Senator Solomon, do you have a question?
I do. Thank you so much. I'm just curious, but maybe you're going to get to it, because pass-through funds sometimes make me a little nervous. So I was just wondering about accountability, and is there certain things that have to be reported back? And that's
that's a great question. So these are federal funds, and so there will be a reporting element to it when they do receive these. It would be very similar to any sort of Byrne funding that they get, where we are required to set them up with federal reporting with what they're doing in their program. They do it on a quarterly basis. There's a semi-annual report that they would also have to complete. And so that would be for CJC, that would actually be part of their agreement to receive these funds, is that federal reporting piece. So absolutely. And then there's also a less than $10,000 pass-through requirement. And this is it's essentially for small size units of government that are referred to as less than $10,000 jurisdictions. There is more detail to this that I can provide in the next meeting, but I just wanted this is something that potentially could be waived if it didn't fit how you all wanted to prioritize this. But it is something that also is a requirement in terms of where allocations go. So, and it just means sometimes local governments, because of their size, aren't eligible to receive direct funding from BJA, and so we would kind of provide that pass through so that they would be able to receive some of these funds, and so something to consider as well. That was super fast on both of those. I just kind of wanted to make you aware of some of the requirements for funding, so that we could have kind of a larger discussion next time. Any questions on either of those two slides in terms of what is required? Okay. And then just next steps, this is very similar to what we went over last time. Your all's job is to decide where these funds go and to prioritize. And so, you know, where these subawards are going to go to. This is the conversations that we'll have in April about how to prioritize this. Like I said, you'll receive these two presentations that were done today. You have all of the prior presentations as well, for information. We do need quorum. That is another, I'm going to say that a couple of times. We do need quorum to be able to make any decision. So if you do accept the next meeting, please make sure that you can attend. For that next meeting, is there anything you all need besides, you know, specifics in terms of where funds can go, a little bit more detail? Is there anything you feel like you need from us? From CJC staff to be able to facilitate this discussion and, you know, go through, you know, I'll go through kind of the program description that's required from BJA. We'll definitely have that available to y'all. And so you understand kind of what the process is to get this approved, things like that we can provide. But is there anything else that you feel like you all need to start having these discussions and make these decisions? Jeff.
Well, I'm going to come across as kind of dumb here, but and you know, we've got smart like legislators on here that deal with, you know, allocation of money all the time. And you know, I work on our budget, but I don't allocate money to anything outside of my agency. And so, you know, I've paid close attention to all this, and I understand what the program, what the I guess in a broad sense, what the presentations presented to us in terms of what they would like to do. But I don't know how much all these things would cost each of these things. Each of these presentations. And so I hope we're going to get some more information about, you know, how to marry up the amount of money that is available with the asks that are being asked, because I don't think I've heard that.
Yes, so that's a great point. So do you want to know kind of the process of where and how this funding would go to these particular organizations, or what that process actually looks like? Because right now the only thing that we are trying to do is, when CJC applied, because we had to apply to receive these grants, these funds through this grant, we had a program description, and the program description as it currently is very vague. It's like, can we receive these? And what your all's job to do in April is to essentially give us enough information so that we can then provide BJA with a program description as to where these funds are going to go. Right. And so the price of them, or who's going to apply for those funds, right, as a subaward, that process will be a little bit further down the road as we kind of go through this. But we are just looking for a more concise and specific program description as to where you all think this $3.1 million should be allocated. So in terms of how much everything costs, I don't know that I'll be able to provide that, but I can provide some clarity on what this process is actually going to look like. If you'd like a timeline in terms of when people are going to be applying for these funds, we're not quite there yet, but I can provide that if that's something that you feel like would make this process make a little bit more sense. Would that be helpful?
Well, actually, what you just said makes sense, and
Okay.
and sort of relieves me of what I thought was a greater burden. So
Okay.
so I get it now better. Thank you.
Okay. 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 Any other, somebody has their hand up, I'm sorry. I'm not sure who has their hand up. If you,
Hi,
sorry.
Rachel. It's
Oh, go ahead, Laura.
Hopefully I'm not scooping somebody else here.
Nope,
who
you're
also had
fine.
their hand up, but see if I can figure out how to put it down. Let's see. There we go. Yeah, I guess my question was a little bit similar to Jeff's in that I'm just wondering about what can you tell us about the mechanism, sort of the administrative mechanism by which these funds would go out. Particularly, I'm just curious about subawards, and my ears pricked up when you mentioned tribal government as well. I just recognize that there's tremendous disparities, and wanting to really take an equity focused approach to this, if at all possible. And what are the mechanisms by which this funding would get out, particularly these subawards that you mentioned?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And this is something that I'll give kind of a broad overview, and this is something that I can provide in more detail at the next meeting. This might be a little bit more helpful just because we're almost at time. I just want to be respectful of everybody's time. But so you all are acting as an advisory board that will then advise BJA, right, JAG funds, in terms of a program description for how these are allocated. And if they accept it and they approve it, it's then going to come back down. And the process will be then that specific local entities of government can then apply to receive these funds for very specific programs that you all outline. And so that anybody's eligible to apply. And the subaward will just simply means that CJC will then kind of be a pass-through to provide funds to those applicants. And so it's kind of like I don't know if you've, it's very much like, I don't know, the BJA needs to approve what you all think needs to be prioritized in Oregon based on a program description. And then CJC is then able to act kind of as that entity that can then get that money out to applicants, eligible applicants who feel like they have a program that fits that priority. Does that make sense? And I can go into more detail next time in terms of what that actual process looks like beyond that initial program narrative approval by BJA. That's our deadline. So that program narrative needs to be approved by September 30th. Ideally, it would be nice if we could have funds moving out very quickly after that. And the reason being is because CJC is applying for the 2024 funds already this spring, which we will then receive. And so we want to just kind of get these funds moving as quickly as we can out the door to eligible applicants. So I don't know if that answered your question, but I will provide a lot more detail kind of on this process next time, if you all feel like that will be helpful.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, of course. Anything else you all need besides this process from CJC staff that you feel like, and then it will kind of just be a discussion, what you all think beyond that. Okay, if you think of something or you something comes to mind that you would like to see more of or any more information, you can reach out to me and we'll get something together for you all for the next meeting. And then, like I said, as we continue through this, if we are making decisions in this meeting, we do need quorum or we can't do that. And so please plan on meeting for at least the next couple of months monthly so that we can get through this first initial phase. And then we will continue to have these conversations. And I also just want to point out as well, I know that we have a list of things that we've provided information on. If something else comes about that you want information on to potentially fund, please bring it to this group so that we can get that for you so that you can get any information on that you may need. So real quickly, unless anybody has any comments or questions from today for next meeting, anything, Otherwise, I'm gonna just provide a few minutes that we have left for public comment, should anybody have it. Okay. So with that, if there's any members of the public on here that would like to make public comment, please do so now. You can unmute yourself. Just, take 1 to 2 minutes, and just keep in mind, we are not able to answer any questions. And so just keep it to comments only. So. Okay, I don't see anybody. All right, thank you all so much for being here today. This was a fantastic discussion, and we will see you sometime next month. So enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Rachel. Bye, everyone.
We'll see you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.